It always begins the same way. A whisper in a bar. A rumor shared in the glow of cheap beer and cigarette smoke. A promise of gold hidden deep in the jungles of the Philippines. And every year, someone believes it. When 42-year-old Eduardo Lando Ramos vanished in the summer of 2012, few were surprised. He was one of the countless treasure hunters drawn by a legend older than his father's generation, Yamashita's gold, the lost fortune of the Japanese Empire. The story said it lay buried somewhere beneath the hills of Luzon. Billions in looted treasure, stolen from across Asia during World War II and hidden before Japan's surrender. Gold bars, diamonds, religious relics, all buried in tunnels sealed with the blood of prisoners who built them. Locals said those tunnels were cursed. But greed has a way of drowning out warnings. Lando's body was found 2 weeks later, half buried in mud near an abandoned shaft. The coroner called it an accident, oxygen deprivation. But those who saw his face said something different. His eyes were wide open, as if he'd seen something the living weren't meant to see. And just like that, another name was added to the long list of those who went looking for Yamashita's treasure and never came back. The story of the buried gold doesn't begin with treasure hunters. It begins in 1944, when the Japanese Imperial Army, desperate and cornered, began moving stolen treasure from across Southeast Asia into the Philippines, their last stronghold before the inevitable American invasion. They called it Operation Golden Lily, an operation so secret that even the Emperor's generals whispered its name. Trains full of plunder left Singapore and Bangkok under armed guard. Church bells melted into ingots. Gold teeth torn from prisoners of war. Statues of Buddha cut open and filled with gems. Everything was taken, cataloged, crated, and transported across the sea to the Philippines, where Japanese engineers dug vast underground complexes to hide it all. Each tunnel had traps, false floors, acid containers rigged to burst, booby-trapped doors that would collapse entire caverns. And when the last gold bars were sealed in, the engineers were buried alive. Some by order, some by dynamite. The man behind this operation was General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the so-called Tiger of Malaya. A brilliant, ruthless strategist who had once conquered Singapore in just weeks. But by 1945 he was losing the war, and his troops were hoarding gold like a dragon in its dying breath. When the Americans returned to the Philippines, Yamashita retreated into the mountains. Legend says he took his secret to the grave, but others believe he didn't, because within months of his surrender in September 1945, strange things began to happen. American intelligence officers began intercepting Japanese maps, sketches of tunnels, and treasure inventories written in cryptic kanji. Many of them pointed to the same regions where modern treasure hunters still die today. Benguet, Nueva Ecija, Davao, and the outskirts of Manila. The Americans had their own name for it, the Golden Lily Treasure. Rumors swirled that the first man to find proof of it wasn't a treasure hunter, but an American soldier named Major Edward Lansdale, a future CIA operative who would later become one of the most influential men in Cold War Southeast Asia. According to declassified fragments and witness accounts, Lansdale and his team captured Yamashita's driver, a man named Major Kojima, who led them to one of the first treasure sites. What happened next reads like fiction. They found a chamber filled with gold bars stacked higher than a man's head, engraved with Japanese symbols, sealed in wax. And instead of reporting it, Lansdale allegedly made a deal. The treasure was quietly moved, not to Manila, not to Tokyo, but to secret American accounts used to fund anti-communist operations throughout Asia. Billions of dollars in war loot became black money, hidden in offshore banks, fueling covert wars that would shape the next half-century. But the Filipinos never saw a cent. And when Lansdale returned to the U.S., he brought more than gold. He brought knowledge. He knew there were still dozens of undiscovered sites buried under the soil of the Philippines, and that knowledge spread like a virus. From that moment, the curse of Yamashita's gold entered a new phase. It was no longer just about what the Japanese buried, but about who would kill, lie, and die trying to uncover it. Fast forward to the 1970s, a man named Ferdinand Marcos ruled the Philippines with an iron fist, a dictator cloaked in wealth and paranoia. His wife, Imelda, built palaces and filled them with ivory and crystal. The world wondered where all their money came from. Marcos claimed it was from clever investments, but whispers told another story. Some said Marcos had found a map, a real one, to Yamashita's treasure. And unlike the amateur diggers, he had the military power to excavate it. Witnesses later claimed that Marcos's forces recovered several of the treasure sites in secret. Truckloads of gold bars were said to have been flown out of the mountains under cover of night, delivered straight to his personal vaults. Others said the dictator struck a deal with old American contacts, men who knew about the treasure since 1945. Together, they looted what was left of the Golden Lily network. One engineer, Rogelio Rojas, later claimed he discovered one of the lost chambers beneath a hospital site in Baguio City. Inside, he said, was a life-sized statue of Buddha, made of pure gold. Rojas took photos, recorded the site, even sold small gold pieces to prove it. But soon after, his home was raided by soldiers. He was beaten, imprisoned, and the golden Buddha vanished, allegedly seized by Marcos's men. Rojas spent the rest of his life fighting for recognition in court. He died mysteriously before he could testify. Years later, in 1996, a Hawaiian court would rule that the Marcos family had indeed profited from the treasure, awarding the Rojas estate hundreds of millions of dollars. But even that ruling couldn't stop the flood. By the 2000s, the legend of Yamashita's gold had spread far beyond the Philippines. Japanese veterans' families, ex-CIA operatives and treasure hunters from as far as Australia and the US were sneaking into the forests with metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and hope. They called themselves prospectors. Locals called them grave robbers. And time after time, the ground swallowed them whole. Collapsed tunnels, poisoned air, flooded shafts. Some bodies were found. Most weren't. The jungles of Luzon became a cemetery of greed. And even now, locals swear they can hear voices near the old dig sites at night. The sound of shovels, chains, screams that echo and fade. When you speak to the old farmers who live near these mountains, they'll tell you the same thing. The gold is real, but it doesn't want to be found. Because maybe it was never just a legend. Maybe it was a warning. The same warning that men like Lando Ramos ignored, that every bar of gold hidden in those tunnels was paid for in blood. And anyone who goes looking for it will eventually pay the same price. Somewhere deep in those forests, tunnels still run for miles. Concrete sealed with wartime precision. Metal doors fused shut by age and heat. Somewhere down there, the remains of soldiers, Japanese and Filipino alike, are still guarding what they died to hide. The truth is, no one really knows how much was buried. Estimates range from 100 billion to nearly 300 billion in today's value. But the number doesn't matter anymore, because every dig since the war has uncovered something else. Bones, helmets, skeletons fused to shovels. Proof that the gold was real, and proof that the curse was too. Every treasure hunter swears they'll be the one to break it. Every one of them ends up the same way, just like Lando. The story of Yamashita's gold isn't just a mystery of lost fortune, it's a mirror of human obsession, a reminder that some secrets from war refuse to stay buried because the people who chase them keep digging their own graves. And as night falls over the mountains of Luzon, the jungle hums with a sound older than greed. The quiet pulse of something still hidden, still waiting for the next man who thinks he can outsmart a ghost. Every legend has a heartbeat, something that keeps it alive long after logic says it should have died. For Yamashita's gold, that heartbeat was ink on old paper, hand-drawn maps, symbols carved into bamboo, cryptic diaries passed down through families. Some looked like childish sketches, others like blueprints designed by madmen. Tunnels spiraling downward, arrows pointing to buried chambers, and coordinates written in a mixture of Japanese, Spanish, and Tagalog. To most people, they were worthless scraps. To treasure hunters, they were the Holy Grail. And it all began with the men who created them, the soldiers, engineers, and officers who worked under the Japanese Imperial Army during the final months of the war. Men who were told they were building storage depots, not realizing they were entombing the greatest plunder in modern history. When Japan surrendered in 1945, those who survived were sworn to silence. Many destroyed their maps before capture. Others hid them, hoping to return one day. A few tried. Most disappeared. But in the years that followed, some of those maps surfaced, and that's when the hunt began in earnest. By the 1950s, rumors of Yamashita's treasure maps were circulating across the Pacific. Antique dealers, ex-military brokers, and local politicians traded photocopies for thousands of dollars. Each one promised a different location: a cave, a riverbank, a hidden vault beneath a church. And among these maps were a handful that looked too precise to dismiss. Because when treasure hunters followed them, they often found something. Not gold, but evidence. Spent cartridges, Japanese insignia, fragments of concrete walls, even skeletal remains still wearing rusted dog tags. That was enough to keep the obsession burning. Then, in 1946, an event occurred that would quietly change everything. A young American intelligence officer named Edward Lansdale returned to the Philippines on a classified mission. Officially, his task was to gather intelligence for the rebuilding of the post-war government. Unofficially, he was working on something else, something buried, literally. Accounts from military insiders suggest that Lansdale's team, operating under the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS precursor to the CIA, captured Major Kojima Kashii, one of General Yamashita's closest aides. Kojima was tortured for information, and under interrogation he drew maps, detailed diagrams of tunnel networks and hidden vaults spread across the Luzon highlands. It's said that one of those maps led Lansdale to a chamber, and what they found inside became one of the most closely guarded secrets of the 20th century. The reports, though fragmented and heavily redacted, describe a cavern lined with gold bars, each marked with the Japanese chrysanthemum seal. Dozens of boxes, stacked neatly, with numbers corresponding to a coded ledger. The site was booby-trapped, but still intact. And instead of announcing it, the discovery was buried under a new layer of secrecy. According to several witnesses, including a Filipino agent who later defected, Lansdale informed General MacArthur, the U.S. commander who had just returned triumphantly to the Philippines. Together, they decided to keep the treasure hidden, funneling its recovery through covert military channels. Billions of dollars worth of looted gold quietly vanished from history and was allegedly repurposed as Black Eagle Trust funds, used to bankroll anti-communist operations during the Cold War. In other words, Yamashita's treasure became the secret piggy bank of American intelligence. Of course, officially, none of this ever happened. The U.S. government has never acknowledged any connection, but witnesses, soldiers, diggers, even a few Japanese survivors, tell a different story. In 1953, a retired Filipino colonel named Santos Marquez claimed to have escorted American officers to an excavation site near Nueva Ecija. He described crates loaded onto army trucks, guarded by U.S. MPs, driven to Clark Air Base, and never seen again. When Marquez tried to speak publicly, he died in a car accident 2 months later. His son later found his father's notebook. The final entry read, "The gold is not Japan's anymore. It's America's curse now." It's this combination of truth and rumor, fact and myth, that gave Yamashita's gold its strange immortality. Because every time the trail seemed to end, a new clue surfaced. A map in an old trunk, a coded diary in a dead soldier's chest, a whispered confession in a bar. By the 1960s, these artifacts had become a black market obsession. Treasure hunters spent lifetimes decoding the symbols: triangles for vaults, circles for chambers, crosses for death traps. Some claimed the markings were inspired by Masonic geometry, others by Shinto cosmology. In truth, no one knew, but everyone believed. Among the most infamous of these hunters was a man named Rogelio Rojas, a watch repairman from Baguio City who would later shake the Marcos regime to its core. But before Rojas, there was another, Jose Lagdameo, a school teacher turned explorer who, in 1961, claimed he'd found a tunnel entrance based on a map purchased from a Japanese collector. Lagdameo and his team dug for 6 months straight. They reached an underground chamber supported by timber beams. The air inside was heavy, metallic, almost sacred. And in the center of that dark pit, they found a human skeleton, kneeling, head bowed, facing a sealed metal door. There were markings carved into the wall. Japanese characters. Roughly translated, they read, "The Emperor's treasure sleeps beyond. Disturb and die." The men sealed the tunnel again and left. A week later, Lagdameo suffered a heart attack and died at 42. The locals called it the Curse of the Golden General. And once again, the treasure sank back into myth. But myths don't stay buried forever, especially when money is involved. As the Cold War raged on, whispers of Yamashita's gold made their way into intelligence circles again. Japan's economy was booming, and certain powerful families, including those with wartime ties, began showing inexplicable wealth. Some researchers believe they were connected to what historians call the M Fund, a mysterious pool of post-war money allegedly created from recovered treasure to stabilize Japan's post-war economy under U.S. supervision. The details are hazy, the documents mostly classified, but one thing is clear: the gold didn't just vanish. It moved, quietly, secretly, through banks, shells, and nations. By the late 1970s, the Philippines had become a magnet for hunters, spies, and crooks, each claiming to have the real map, the true coordinates, the inside connection. And watching from his palace, President Ferdinand Marcos saw opportunity. He wasn't a man who believed in curses, he believed in power. It said Marcos had teams of engineers working under the guise of infrastructure projects, drilling into mountains under military guard. Some of those projects were near old Japanese garrisons. Others near villages where elders swore the ground bled oil, a sign, they said, of sealed chambers below. There were stories of entire units disappearing, tunnels collapsing, soldiers poisoned by trapped gas. The government denied everything. But in 1971, Rogelio Rojas re-emerged, holding something the world could no longer ignore. A solid gold Buddha weighing nearly a ton. And that discovery would ignite the deadliest chapter of all.
The year was 1971, and the Philippines was sinking into the shadow of martial law. Curfews darkened the cities. Protests were crushed before they began, and President Ferdinand Marcos ruled with a smile that hid his iron fist. But in the northern highlands of Luzon, a man named Rogelio Rojas was making history. Or what should have been history. Rojas wasn't a soldier, or a politician, or a spy. He was a watch repairman, a quiet man with oil-stained hands who spent his evenings tinkering with gears in his small Baguio shop. But he had something far more valuable than any politician: a map. It came from a Japanese informant, an old man who claimed to have worked under General Yamashita during the war. He told Rojas of a tunnel beneath a local hospital, one of many that ran beneath the city. Inside, he said, lay one of the Golden Lily's final vaults. Most dismissed it as another tall tale, but Rojas believed. And belief, in this story, was always the first step toward ruin. With a few friends, he began to dig quietly beneath a hill called Lepanto, a place whispered to be cursed. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became. The scent of rust and age filled the tunnels. After weeks of labor, they hit stone, and then metal. They broke through to a sealed chamber. Inside, the beam of Rojas's flashlight trembled as it landed on a shape rising from the shadows. It was a statue of Buddha, life-sized, serene, its face glimmering beneath layers of dust. When Rojas wiped away the grime, the light reflected off something solid. It wasn't bronze, it wasn't copper. It was gold. Solid, pure gold. The chamber held more, wooden crates stacked along the walls. Rojas pried one open and his breath caught. Inside were bars of gold, each stamped with the chrysanthemum seal of Imperial Japan. Hundreds of them. He had done it. He had found Yamashita's gold. The team sealed the site again, terrified the government might seize it, and quietly transported the golden Buddha to Rojas's home. He hid it in his basement and told only a few people. But secrets like this don't stay quiet for long. Within weeks, word spread, from Baguio to Manila, from the slums to the presidential palace. And when it reached Ferdinand Marcos, everything changed. Marcos had long heard rumors of the Golden Lily treasure, but now for the first time someone had proof. A living man with photographs, witnesses, and a literal golden statue. For a dictator drowning in greed, it was irresistible. At first, Marcos played nice. He sent emissaries to verify Rojas's claims, polite officials offering to help protect his find. Rojas, naive but proud, showed them his discovery. He even allowed them to take photographs.
Days later, soldiers stormed his house. They seized the statue, the gold bars, and every piece of evidence. Rojas himself was beaten, arrested, and thrown into a military cell. His wife was threatened. His family fled. When he was finally released weeks later, everything was gone. His gold, his maps, his life's work. And yet the story didn't die. Because something inside that chamber, something real, had been unearthed. And too many people had seen it. Over the following years, Marcos's unexplained wealth began to grow at an impossible rate. Swiss bank accounts, secret shipments, gold certificates traded through foreign intermediaries. He was officially one of the richest men in Asia, but no one could explain where the money came from. The answer, many whispered, was buried beneath Luzon. As Marcos tightened his grip on the country, he launched a covert treasure recovery operation under the guise of national development. Military engineers drilled into mountains across the north. Officially, they were building tunnels, hydroelectric plants, and roads. Unofficially, they were excavating Yamashita's vaults. Those who worked on the projects spoke of tunnels filled with skeletons, of sealed chambers that reeked of death when opened. Some said the soldiers wept when they found the gold, because they knew the men buried with it had been alive when the Japanese sealed them in. Others never returned at all. The treasure was said to be stored in hidden vaults beneath Malacañang Palace, under army bases, even inside secret offshore accounts managed by trusted intermediaries. It was no longer just a legend. It had become a shadow economy. Then came 1986, the year of the People Power Revolution. Marcos fled the country amid mass protests, leaving behind a crumbling dictatorship and an empire built on stolen wealth. When investigators entered his palace, they found gold bars stacked in closets, jewelry worth millions, and accounts linked to Swiss banks holding unimaginable sums. But no one ever found the Golden Buddha. Rojas, broken but still defiant, resurfaced soon after. He filed a lawsuit against the Marcos family in Hawaii, accusing them of theft and human rights abuses. For years, the case dragged on as witnesses disappeared and documents vanished. But Rojas never gave up. In 1993, he was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Heart attack, they said. But his friends swore he'd been poisoned. 3 years later, in 1996, a Hawaiian court ruled in favor of the Rojas estate, confirming that the Marcos family had indeed stolen treasure discovered by Rojas, including the Golden Buddha. The judgment ran into hundreds of millions of dollars. But even that didn't bring closure, because the gold itself was never recovered. To this day, the Golden Buddha's whereabouts remain unknown. Some say it was melted down and sold to Swiss banks. Others believe it sits in a private vault somewhere in Europe owned by one of Marcos's old allies. A few whisper that it's still buried somewhere in the mountains, sealed again to keep its curse alive. But the legend didn't end with Rojas or Marcos. In fact, that's when it began to spread like wildfire.
Because if a poor watchmaker could find one treasure site, how many more were still waiting to be discovered? Hundreds? Thousands? Each one guarded by death and superstition. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, modern adventurers began flooding the Philippines. Americans, Australians, Japanese descendants of former soldiers, even CIA retirees who still remembered the rumors from the war. They brought drones, scanners, and explosives. They brought money. And they brought the same greed that had cursed everyone before them. Entire villages were displaced by illegal digs, forests torn apart. In Benguet province, a team led by a Korean investor vanished after detonating charges in a tunnel system. Locals later found their camp. Everything intact except the men. In Nueva Vizcaya,
A team of prospectors unearthed crates of bones instead of gold. The skeletons were still wearing tattered imperial uniforms. For every rumor of treasure found, there were 10 stories of death. And yet, every new generation believes they'll be the one to break the curse. The one who will dig just deep enough to pull out a fortune that's been killing people for 80 years. The truth, though, is darker, because beneath the soil of Luzon lies more than gold. There are the ghosts of war, the scars of dictatorship, and the greed that binds them together. Every map is a lie drawn over another man's grave. Every clue is bait for another victim. And somewhere out there, in the thick of the Philippine jungle, a tunnel still breathes, faintly, like a dying heartbeat. Inside, the air is stale, heavy, waiting for footsteps, waiting for someone foolish, waiting for someone foolish enough to believe they can claim what's already been bought with blood. The dictator's vaults may be empty now, but the curse that filled them, the hunger for more, the silence of those who know, is still alive. Because gold doesn't rot, and neither does greed.
The rain comes first. It always does. In the mountains of Luzon, it rolls in from the sea like a living thing, gray, endless, heavy enough to swallow sound. The locals say that's when the spirits move, when the jungle breathes deeper, when the gold remembers. It's 2024, and the story of Yamashita's gold is supposed to be over. The war ended 8 decades ago. The generals are dust. The dictator is long dead. And yet, the digging hasn't stopped. You can find them everywhere now. Men with shovels and ground scanners, old maps printed off the internet, YouTube channels promising proof of secret vaults. They film their hunts for clicks, claiming they'll find the treasure live on camera. Some of them vanish mid-series. Others come back with eyes hollowed by something they can't explain. In the province of Benguet, villagers still remember the foreign team that came in 2018. 6 men, 1 translator, a truck full of drilling gear. They told everyone they were geologists. Then they disappeared into the forest. A week later, a single man stumbled out, barefoot, delirious, mumbling the same words over and over. We opened the door. They were waiting. He died before morning. When authorities searched the site, all they found were twisted beams and a hole that went down forever. But maybe that's the real story here. Not the treasure itself, but the people it consumes. Every generation feeds the legend. Every death adds another verse to its curse. Skeptics say the treasure can't exist, that it's impossible for Japan to have moved that much gold without leaving evidence. They call the stories Cold War propaganda, designed to justify hidden intelligence funds and political corruption. And yet, pieces keep surfacing. A single gold bar stamped with the chrysanthemum seal recovered from a landslide. A corroded crate unearthed by accident during road construction. A tunnel collapse revealing human remains still bound in wire.
Nothing ever large enough to prove the legend outright, but always enough to keep it alive. Archaeologists warn that the true cost isn't measured in bullion, but in lives. Entire hillsides have been torn apart by illegal excavations, groundwater poisoned by fuel runoff, ancient burial caves destroyed by dynamite. Every time someone digs, the jungle bleeds a little more. And the irony? If the treasure ever were found, it would belong not to the diggers, not even to the nation, but to the ghosts who built it, men and women enslaved under a dying empire's command.
Every coin minted from that gold would be stained with the blood of those who never left the tunnels alive. Even within Manila's upper circles, the whispers persist. Retired generals meeting in private rooms, old bankers who claim to have seen the accounts. Names traded like secrets. Golden Lily, Black Eagle, M Fund. Echoes of operations that supposedly ended decades ago. Some insist the gold was recovered long ago and used to manipulate world politics, to fund coups, buy elections, collapse economies. Others say only fragments were taken. The rest still sleeps beneath the mountains, guarded not by soldiers, but by the weight of history itself. In 2020, an investigative journalist named Lara VR tried to trace one of those rumored accounts, a Swiss vault allegedly tied to a Marcos front company. Her notes ended mid-sentence. The last line on her recorder: "They told me to stop asking questions. But what if the curse isn't superstition? What if it's protection?" She was found drowned 3 days later in Laguna Bay. The case remains unsolved. Locals talk about strange lights near old dig sites, floating orbs, the smell of metal, the sudden drop in temperature before the ground caves in. Some say it's methane or trapped gas. Others swear it's something else. One priest described it best: "Every soul who died for that gold is still guarding it. When you dig, you wake them up." Even government warnings haven't stopped the new wave of digital treasure hunters. They come armed with drones, sonar, and viral ambitions, convinced they're smarter than the curse. But the jungle has patience. It waits for arrogance, because the curse isn't magic. It's human nature. It's greed dressed as destiny. It's the same blindness that drove Yamashita's men to bury a nation's stolen wealth, and Marcos to bury his people's future. If the legend is true, then somewhere in those hills lies enough gold to rebuild a country. And yet, the Philippines still struggles, its mountains stripped bare, its history scarred by the hunt for a ghost. Maybe that's the cruelest truth of all. The treasure was never meant to be found. It was meant to tempt, to test, to reveal who we become when we think no one is watching. For every man who digs a hole looking for gold, there's another digging a grave without realizing it. The jungle keeps score. The ghosts keep watch. And the gold keeps shining, cold, silent, waiting. Sometimes, late at night when the wind moves through the bamboo, locals say you can hear the faint clinking of chains beneath the earth, the echo of prisoners still working, still burying what can never be unearthed. Maybe that's imagination. Or maybe that's history reminding us that greed doesn't end with death. It just changes hands. So the next time you hear about another discovery, another brave soul promising to expose the truth of Yamashita's gold, remember, the story always ends the same way, with silence, with another hole in the ground, with another name added to the curse. Because some treasures were never meant to be found, and some truths were buried for a reason. And if you're still watching, still breathing in that silence with me, then don't look away now. Because the world buries its darkest stories beneath distraction. And every forgotten voice sinks a little deeper. Hit subscribe, not for me, but for the truth that's still underground. Because every time you stay silent, the curse wins again.